Okay, perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our Fulbright 101 kickoff event, virtual edition. As many of you probably know, the 2026-2027 Fulbright application for the U.S. student program launched just last week on March 31st, and we had our first in-person kickoff event soon thereafter, and we are excited to bring this virtual version of this event to you as part of Spark this week. Fulbright is a great fit for students who are interested in projects in art and research and knowledge. Some components of the acronym for Spark. And today we're going to do a little bit of an overview of what the Fulbright U.S. student program is, who is eligible for it. And we are also joined by a recently returned Fulbright U.S. student participant. She is now an alumna of the program. That's Caitlin McGee. You'll get to hear from her. And we are set to be joined later this session by one of our current semifinalists who is awaiting her final decision. So with that, we will get underway. Hopefully. Again, technical. All right, there we go. So the Fulbright U.S. student program has been administered for nearly, what's that, like 80 years about, and overseen by Congress. It is a post-undergraduate experience. So some folks are familiar with the name Fulbright, and it has different iterations. There's the U.S. student program, which we're here talking about today. There's also the Scholar program. And this is a binational agreement, which means that it is about as much about sending our U.S. students outbound, our U.S. scholars outbound, as it is to receive international students and scholars to the U.S. So we have this binational reciprocation of information sharing, culture sharing. And so those are some of the things that are most important to the Fulbright program. And you can see here on the slide that Fulbright is administered by IIE, who oversees Fulbright and many other programs and awards that you might hear us talk about in OSDFA. The Fulbright U.S. student eligibility, oftentimes there's some popular or common misconceptions about, who might be eligible for these types of awards. And so, as I mentioned, it's a postgraduate experience. So students who are current undergrads, who are maybe rising seniors, or even, my rising juniors can start thinking about this. The time of application, though, comes nearly a whole year before graduation. So if you are a current junior right now in this spring semester, or even a senior, this is a great time for you to be thinking about the Fulbright U.S. student program. We're going to go through the whole timeline, but essentially it is open now. It's open for quite a period of time, about 6 months, due in the fall. And so again, if you are a rising senior, you'll be in your senior year in that fall semester, and then this would line up perfectly with when you finish graduation. If you're a current senior, this would be something you would be thinking about for about a year out. We also have current graduate students who are eligible for this opportunity, as well as alumni of Rutgers University in Camden. So lots of folks. Essentially, you are eligible for a Fulbright U.S. student program anytime from the point in which you earn your bachelor's degree, including, so you can apply without having yet earned it. That's perfectly okay, just as long as you'll have it by the time your award starts, all the way up until you have a PhD in your hand. So for lots of people, that's going to be kind of forever, right? Maybe not everybody's going to go get that PhD. But if you're a graduate student who's in a PhD program, you're still eligible as long as you won't have earned your PhD by the time your program begins. Okay. The common misconceptions, right? Oh, well, I have to have a 4.0 GPA. I have to be this like perfect scholar on paper. Not true. They don't actually ask what your GPA is. There's no minimum requirement. I have to be studying certain things, right? I have to have language experience. I have to be studying global affairs. Not true at all. Every area, there's opportunities for you as well. So we're going to get into some of the country-specific requirements and how to think about the different types of awards available. But Fulbright is probably one of the most accessible awards that are available to students at every stage of study. Okay, so there are a variety of program award types. You can see the vast number of awards that are given each year across the globe. More than 140 countries that have historically participated in the Fulbright U.S. student program. And they're essentially broken out into what we say would be three categories, two sort of major buckets. In the study research bucket, you can kind of take two paths. Study, so you can go and you can earn a graduate degree abroad. And for lots of folks, graduate degrees in other parts of the world often are one-year programs. Commonly, we think of a master's degree in the US as being a two-year program. Often it is. But in many other countries, you'll find one-year programs are very common. So it's very nicely aligned with the Fulbright. And of course, Fulbright is providing funding. That is kind of what they're doing as part of their mission. And so it may be applicable towards your tuition, but in all cases, it's going to give you a stipend for living abroad and kind of, all the things that go along with that. The other pathway in the study research bucket is research. And so that's an opportunity to propose essentially an independent study of sorts. So if you are a current graduate student, this may be building on something that you're doing towards your master's thesis or your doctoral studies. If you're a recent undergraduate, you might be building on something that you had worked on while you were an undergraduate researcher. This may be the foundation for what will become a master's or doctoral thesis. So research is another very popular and common pathway, and we can talk about who might be best suited for that. And then the ETA is, as you can see, it has the most robust number of awards. It's probably one of the more popular paths. But of course, it's really about finding your fit. But the ETA essentially allows you to go and teach English abroad in a variety of different classrooms, so different environmental settings, right? Whether you want to be in a more rural environment or a more urban environment, if you want to teach, elementary age children, or if you want to be at the university level. Each country will have a profile that will tell you a little bit about where you would be placed, with what population. And again, popular and common misconception is that you must have language skills. In some countries, that is true, and certainly is desirable in some cases. But really, it's about being a strong English speaker. And a lot of countries don't have a language requirement for you to be able to go and teach English abroad. And so we'll get into that a little bit more as well. So the application is made up of a few basic components, and they have changed for the 26-27 cycle. So if you're a prior applicant, you've already kind of been through this process, or you've seen the Fulbright application in a previous iteration, it will look different this year. So some things that haven't really changed are the basic background information about yourself, and the program information that they ask you to provide. So some of the most common things include an abstract, which oftentimes students will write at the end. That's usually one of the last pieces that you'll work on, and it's kind of an amalgamation of all the things you've been thinking about throughout the process of applying. Host country engagement, I think, is what it sounds like. So part of you being a Fulbright scholar is to proudly represent the United States in your host country. And so how do you want to engage with the people of your country? Often this is not in any way related to your project or the reason for you being there. It can be something very personal. So if you have a personal set of skills or a hobby that you want to share, or an interest, like you love music and you can't wait to go to the festivals, you can write about those things in the host country engagement. It's really just about how you understand your country, how you hope to better understand it, and how you hope to share your perspectives as a US citizen. And then future plans. Fulbright is investing in you financially and otherwise, right? So they want to hear, okay, we're going to give you this. We want to invest in you as a U.S. student scholar. What are we getting out of that? And this is where you tell them, well, when I get back from my Fulbright year, I'm applying to law school, or I'm going to go get my graduate degree in this field, or I'm going to go work for this nonprofit. And this is how I'm kind of, giving back and sharing my experience as a Fulbright scholar. Essays. These are the pieces of the application that have historically always taken up the most time, and why I'm thrilled that you're all here today in April to start talking about Fulbright, because this is the thing that we will work on throughout the duration of the summer in anticipation of the national deadline. So the statement of grant purpose is kind of your who, what, where, when, why statement, right? So Who are you? Where do you want to go? Why do you want to go? What do you want to do while you're there? You know, all those pieces. Why now? Why you? And you can see there is a slight difference in length for the research study awards versus the English teaching. For the English teaching, you don't have to often provide as much detail. You know, what is it that you want to do? You want to teach, why? You can unpack those things, but they do reserve a little less space for it. Whereas with the study and the research, you're essentially making a proposal, right? This is not a designed program the way an ETA is. With the study research, you have to say, I want to go to graduate school in the UK to study this, and this is the institution, and this is the researcher, and so on and so forth. And this is why it's going to help me achieve the goals that I have long term. For research, you're doing a lot of the same things. This is the project I want to undertake. These are, you know, this is why I have to do it in this remote area of Greece. You know, you give all the details. This is the timeline for my project. This is what I anticipate achieving as my outcomes. You sort of detail all of that. So you have a little bit more space to do so. In the short answer section, this is what used to be essentially our personal statement. But as you can imagine, telling your story as well as trying to include a lot of these other components, which were always sort of being sought after in the personal statement, in a more implicit way, now has been explicitly asked for. So they have these 3 short answers, and anybody who's ever applied for a Gilman Scholarship might recognize that this is a very similar format to what they have. The Gilman Scholarship, like Fulbright, is administered by IIE, and in fact is often kind of a gateway to Fulbright. And so there's some similarity there. And so a big part of applying for a Fulbright and being successful in doing so, and you'll hear that from Caitlin soon, is being able to depict yourself as being someone who is both flexible and adaptable. That's a big thing that they've always been looking for as evidenced in your other essays, right, historically. And now they've decided to just outright ask it. Tell us about, you know, your flexibility and adaptability. What kind of experiences have you had in your life that have prepared you to head to another country and navigate that and whatever comes of it? So Fulbright flexibility is definitely something that we talk a lot about. Community engagement. Again, like host country engagement, this is how you intend to interact with your community. And in this case, if you visit the website, it spells out the specifics of the prompts, but this is how, again, you're interacting with your host country. And then impact, again, future plans, very similar. What is it that you expect to get from the Fulbright award long-term? These things should be consistent and stagnant from prior iterations, but essentially 3 references are needed, whether you're applying to a study research or an ETA. In the case of an ETA, it's really more of a reference form. It's not really a letter of recommendation. And it's a couple short answers that they have to complete on a form. The references for a study research, either of those 2 awards is in fact a true letter of recommendation. And so for that reason, you know, I mentioned the distinction because if you are thinking about applying to graduate school or applying to do a research opportunity abroad, it's really in your best interest to ask those references as early as possible, especially if they're going to have to kind of start to think about that letter of recommendation. I always remind students that the application is due very early in the fall. It's due in early October. And for that reason, like your faculty, if you decide to ask them in September, they're just coming back to a new semester and kind of getting settled, and it can be a lot. So it's better to give them the gift of time. If you are applying to a country that requires a foreign language, particular level of knowledge, you would have to submit a foreign language evaluation. In many other countries, this is optional or not required at all if, you know, the primary language is English. But if it's required, then you submit this evaluation, and our office can talk to you a little bit more about what that process looks like and how you can identify the proper sources to provide you with a foreign language evaluation. Transcripts. I always like to make this note. So you'll see all over the Fulbright website that unofficial transcripts are perfectly acceptable, and that is true. And so if you went to Camden County College, I'm just going to use them as an example, before arriving to Rutgers and Camden, and on your unofficial transcript, it says Camden County College, you're fine. No need for you to request an official transcript. At Rutgers, across the university, we do not print Rutgers University on an unofficial. You will see Camden College of Arts and Sciences or the graduate school at Camden, but you will not see Rutgers anywhere. And so for that reason, we tell all students that they must get an official from Rutgers. And so it becomes unofficial when it comes to you.
Year that most correlates to when you would turn.
Sorry, I can't see, so I'm only looking at the screens for the slide, so I apologize. So you would need an official. Students are entitled to 2 free printed transcripts each academic year. So the academic year runs until August 31st, and then it turns over a new leaf on September 1st. And so you can ask for an official printed one, and it will be free. If you ask for an official digital copy, it's not free, unfortunately. But if you want the free ones, get them printed. And then either you can pick them up from the office of the registrar, you can have them sent to your home, we can pick them up for you. Once it's in your possession and opened, it's unofficial, but that's fine because that official watermarked copy is going to have Rutgers on it. So that's a really important thing that we always like to share with students. And of course, as you kind of go through these processes, we advise you through everything. You have a team of people behind you to support you through all parts of the application. Okay. So what are they looking for? You'll see that feasibility is the other F of Fulbright that we talk about. So we talked about flexibility, but feasibility. One common popular kind of myth is like that Fulbright is going to be checking up on you. I wouldn't say that that's the case, right? So what they're looking for when you submit your proposal, particularly if it's for research, where you're sort of operating very independently, is that what you've proposed is practical and achievable and reasonable in the amount of time that you're going to have, and that you've perhaps already allotted for some missteps or time, conflicts or things that could kind of go awry in the process. That reality is there, and if you can demonstrate that in your proposal, they're going to be very appreciative and usually more in favor of you. They're looking at your academics, so they are looking at your transcript, but they don't have a minimum of what they're looking for, but they're just looking for evidence of your preparedness. If you say you want to study Korean, do you have any evidence that you've ever studied it, here in the US? Have you demonstrated that? And if you haven't, somewhere in your application, you should be talking about why that's the case. Language preparation kind of falls into that same category, of course. And then each country, each award within that country is going to spell out very clearly for you what they're looking for in a candidate. And if we have an opportunity today, I can show you an example by looking at the website. The website is live. You can look through all of this information on there, but kind of playing your application to what they're looking for in a candidate, really playing up the strengths of yours that match those candidate profile specifics. Those things are going to be strongly considered in the selection process. Okay. And this, again, kind of how they're reviewing you. And generally speaking, the personal attributes, the qualifications and backgrounds, those are consistent across whether you're applying for an ETA or an academic study versus research award. The difference is primarily being, again, like with a study research, is it feasible? Is what you're proposing something that makes sense for this country, makes sense for where you are in your personal journey? Like if you're proposing this really elaborate research project, but you've never done research, like, does that make sense, right? So it's really about practicality. And then for the ETA, it's really about trying to think about how you fit into that mold. A lot of folks, again, commonly misperceive that in order to do an ETA, you have to have a teaching background. You must want to be a teacher in the future. And that's not true. The way that each country will evaluate you is going to be different. But oftentimes they're looking for evidence of leadership, mentorship, some level of experience being comfortable in front of a classroom or other kind of public speaking. So if you've been a student leader, that's a great example. If you've held maybe a management kind of role in your professional career, all of those are great reasons that you would be able to kind of, gain the attention of a classroom full of students. And then how do you think of yourself as a teacher? So a lot of students who are thinking about going on into like careers in healthcare, medicine, I talk to a lot of them and they'll say like, well, I want to be a doctor. So like, does it fit for me to be an ETA? Well, our doctors not teachers. They're teachers of their patients. They're teachers of sometimes training doctors. A lot of what they do is kind of educating and coaching people. And so oftentimes the ETA is actually quite a good fit for them. And so it's really just about thinking broadly about the country that you want to go to, the award that makes the most sense for you. And then that's how you're going to be reviewed based on the presentation that you give. So these are some of the benefits that you can expect. So before you ever travel, you will be afforded with your airfare. You also are going to get an early stipend that helps you kind of get up and running for whatever you might need in preparation for your travel. Once you're in country, you are afforded a monthly stipend, and that is very much detailed. On the country page, they will show you what it costs to live in this country, what you are being afforded, and what is covered by the stipend. Each country will look a little different. This is sort of a general overview. One of the nicest features of applying for an ETA award is that every applicant who is accepted receives TESOL training, and that is a credential that you can carry with you in life. And it's a really nice benefit. It would otherwise be quite expensive. It used to be offered only to a limited number of applicants and recipients, but now every ETA receives those TESOL benefits. And Caitlin, having been an ETA, can talk to you all a little bit about how that has, what that experience was like. Once you're back, as an alumna like Caitlin is, you join a big network of fellow Fulbright alumni. For anyone who is also considering careers at various levels of government, one of the nice perks of a Fulbright is this non-competitive eligibility clause, which allows you to kind of rise to the top of the pile if you are applying for a position within the federal government. And so those are just kind of some of the perks overall. We can get more into the details. And again, each country lists a lot of these things with much more specifics for the country and the award that you're considering. This is a general overview in terms of timeline. So we're right at the start. The application just opened last week. And so this period of time, kind of into the summer, is really the bulk of your work. It seems like it's a lot of time, but for anybody who's applied for this award before, they'll be able to share with you that it takes a lot of time to kind of reflect as you're going through the writing process. Really identifying the right country, the right award for you can take some time. And once you've identified those pieces, in some cases, you need to be in touch with your country. If you're applying to graduate school, you want to give them a heads up that you're applying and maybe even secure a letter of affiliation from the researcher or the mentor that you're hoping to have in your graduate program. Even if it's not required, I really strongly advise everybody to get a letter of affiliation for a research or a study award. For research, of course, it's almost always required. It may not be required at the deadline, but again, you want to have that. It essentially is telling Fulbright that I'm already in touch. I've laid the foundation. I'm doing the legwork to get the attention of my host country, and they're excited for me to come, and they support the project that I want to do. And so we can talk a little bit more about that. Our campus deadline is always in August, and I'm meeting with our committee next month to kind of finalize the date. So in some publications, you might see August 15th, and some you might see August 30th. We have sort of teetered between those. So TBD on the final campus deadline, but it will be in August. It will be either mid or late month, and it is a campus deadline. And so what that means is that we have a committee on campus who is all hands on deck to support you. And what we do is we collect your, completed application at this deadline, and then it is reviewed by the committee. You are interviewed very casually by the committee. And when I say casually, it's conversational and it's supportive. And then your materials are given back to you with feedback and instruction on how to improve and strengthen your application in September, with enough time for you to edit, tweak, adjust however they have advised and however you think is fitting from that advice prior to the national deadline. I want to be very clear that the campus committee and the campus deadline is not meant to be a barrier to anyone. This is meant to help bolster you and support your success in applying for the Fulbright. We do not restrict anyone. You will never find that you've submitted it and we said, you know what, you shouldn't, apply unless we see something really concerning, right? We might advise you, have you thought about this? Is now the right time? But we have never turned anyone away, and we will not. That is not our practice. We are here to be supportive of you. So September is when all that is taking place. The national deadline is October 7th. That is set by IIE. That is not our deadline. We cannot do anything if you do not have all your materials in and submitted by 5 p.m. on that day. Then your application goes first to a committee of U.S. reviewers. These are experts from across the country in the different fields of discipline, according to your application. If you are successful in that round, you will find out in January that you are a semifinalist, and then your application moves to the host country for review. So if you're applying to do research in Argentina, that's where your application goes in that second half of review. And again, if you're applying for research as the example, hopefully Argentina is already aware of you. You've gotten your letter of affiliation. This is something that they're looking forward to. And then between March and May typically is when final decisions are made and you find out if you are a selected Fulbright recipient. Hopefully you all know this, but our students are doing really well. We have been promoting the Fulbright U.S. student program for about the last 7 or 8 years, roughly. Initially, I was doing this work as a single person in a part-time role, but fortunately, I've been doing it now full-time, and I have Jordan, who's on the call with us today, as our support. We've also built up this faculty and staff committee across campus. We now have 10 faculty and staff members who support this work. And so we've really been able to bolster the outreach and support we can offer for the U.S. student program. And so you can see some of our achievements. And of course, I've mentioned that we are joined today by Caitlin, and you see her name there on the screen. And then each year, we see a larger and larger number of applicants to the U.S. student program, which we couldn't be more proud of. And so hopefully when I can update these slides for next year, it'll say that in October of 25, we supported our new largest cohort. These are some of the places that our students are commonly applying. And so just about every world region is represented in the number of applicants that we have. And again, we continue to hope to grow this and expand upon it. And so if you knew coming into this meeting that Fulbright was for you, or if your interest is piqued just enough, we do have an interest form. It's available on our website. I can also share the link with anyone, in the chat. And you can see that there's a QR there if you'd like to scan. That essentially is just gauging your interest, right? Is this the first time you've ever heard about Fulbright? Great, you can say that. If you've been thinking about it for the last year and you know that you're ready to apply, great, you can say that. In all cases, we'll follow up with you to kind of see what the next steps would look like. So then we would have our meeting. We will promote lots of Fulbright webinars throughout the summer. They will do many applicant support webinars, but we are your main points of contact for applying, and we're happy to support you. And then we will have the campus kind of process that kicks up toward the latter half of the summer and into the September month. For anyone who is kind of curious, I think there's always a hesitancy, like I have to be sure before I even start an application. But our message is open the application. Get in the system, get in the back end, take a look at it, see what kinds of questions are there, what kinds of information you need to really be considering for yourself right now. It never hurts to open it. We have people open it who never submit. That's okay. It's okay. But if you're thinking about it, this is a signal to us that you're really strongly considering this, and then that way we know who we're kind of doing our outreach to and mentorship to. I'll also say that it sends a signal to the U.S. government of how important Fulbright is. Our director for the U.S. student program will be back on the Hill later this month, and he's really excited to tell everybody how many applications have opened in just the first couple of weeks of the new cycle. So it's really great to be able to demonstrate that consistent and ongoing demand for the Fulbright U.S. student program. So please feel free to open the application. It's not in any way going to harm you if you decide ultimately it's not a good fit. It's absolutely okay. And you can indicate that you're applying as part of Rutgers Camden. Then you show up on my portal, and that way, I can be in regular contact with you and offer you the full support. And at this point, I'm going to stop my share in a moment because I want to be able to follow along and see on my side as well. But we're so fortunate to have time tonight for a Q&A with, and I believe Hermina should be joining us if she hasn't already. I can't see yet. Who is a current semifinalist for a research award. And then we have Caitlin, who I know is on the call with us, who is either freshly back or soon will be back, having recently ended her year as an ETA in South Korea. So for a moment, I am going to see if I can stop my share so that I can see everyone also. And I'm gonna ask Caitlin to go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Caitlin. I was an ETA in South Korea in the 2023 to 2024 cycle. I just got home last week, so I'm still adjusting a little bit, but I'm happy to be back because I was gone for a while.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
And I understand from our email exchanges that your ETA program wrapped up in December, is that right?
Yes. So for the South Korea grant, it runs from January to December because that's the Korean school year. I think that's one of the only countries that does that. So if you are interested in an English teaching grant, it probably will not follow that schedule, but that's just a Korea thing.
I've seen some alternative timelines in the Western Hemisphere occasionally. So some of the Latin American countries will also have a spring start time periodically. For research, often that's not the case. You kind of get to make your own schedule, one of the benefits. When you're working with the school system, of course, you have to follow the school year. And I want to say some of those Latin American countries have a similar time frame as what you experienced, Caitlin. I do think that it was unique in Asian countries for the time frame to be what it was that you experienced in South Korea.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I know some other countries have like a robust ETA program. I would say Korea is one of the countries that they take a lot of teachers in. They'd have a very long orientation because they really want you to be trained up to be a teacher. Taiwan, I think as well, Vietnam, maybe there's some other countries. I'm more familiar with the Asia programs, but so Korea for the ETA program, which is more of what I could speak to. The experience really varies by country, but Korea really focuses on training you to be a teacher because they want you to focus on teaching during your grant year.
Okay. Well, if it's okay, we did do a session like this last week, so I'll ask you a couple of the questions that commonly came up from that group, and then we can open it up to questions from this group. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. So what first attracted you to the Fulbright U.S. student program?
Sure. So I had applied with you the first time when I was still an undergraduate student at Rutgers Camden. I applied for a grant in Israel. I found out about the program because I think you were doing like an information session. It was like global studies like seminar, and they mentioned the Fulbright program. So I came to your office and I said, "Oh, that sounds very interesting." So thinking about the countries I was interested in at the time, I was interested in religion, so I wanted to go to Israel. I was a semifinalist that cycle, so I took a year or so off, reevaluated my life now that I had graduated from school. And during COVID, I started reading a lot of Korean comics. So I thought, how about trying to apply a second time? I had also been a librarian by that point. I was in my master's of library science. So I felt like a grant was aligning more with my goals and what was going on in my life at the time. So I came back to Laura and said I would be interested in applying again, and I got it that time.
And so you mentioned that you were training as a librarian, and we know you did an ETA. So talk to us a little bit about how, your professional aspirations aligned with the ETA and your kind of background and experiences, given that and I know this from having worked with you, like you were someone who did not want to be a teacher. And so then yet you ended up in the classroom. So I'd love for you to share that with the group, and then maybe talk about how the experience has helped your professional kind of vision for yourself evolve.
Yeah. So I had a Bachelor of English from Rutgers Camden, and people always ask you, what are you going to do with a degree in English? I didn't want to teach. Um, but after I finished, I started working with the AmeriCorps Vista program, and I was placed in libraries. And I really enjoyed creating programs for people, connecting with patrons, getting to know them. And there's so many diverse members of the community that come to libraries. So I really thought it would be an asset to learn more about living in a community that's different from my own, so I could help understand more of where my patrons are coming from. And then also with that, in libraries, I found myself working in children's services, which wasn't exactly where I wanted to start, but it's what was open at the time. And I didn't enjoy, no, I did work, I enjoyed working with children more than I thought I would, doing story times. The main thing I was daunted by was the idea of lesson planning. But in building my story time confidence, I thought it wouldn't be that difficult of a transition into teaching because they are very similar skill sets. So I decided to go forward with the teaching grant. And after the grant, I had thought about returning to libraries, but I was really inspired by my grant year and the difficulties of moving abroad that I decided I wanted to switch to social work. So I'm starting a master's in social work now, so I can support people in transition in the US, whether it be new Americans, immigrants, or military families.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Perfect. I also see, I want to acknowledge that Mina has joined us. So hi, Mina.
Hey, thank you for letting me join late.
No, that's okay. I know Mina was at work. And so we have both of our semifinalists. Mina, we were just chatting with Caitlin and asking some of the questions that we had asked during the session that we held last week. And so she was able to tell everyone what initially attracted her to applying for a Fulbright, and how her professional goals were aligned and have evolved as a result of kind of that experience. So maybe you could catch everybody up by talking a little bit about, what attracted you to Fulbright and how your interests have been aligned with your application, but also maybe have evolved through the process.
Yeah, thank you again for joining or having me. And for everybody else that's on the call that may not know me, my name is Mina Garrick. And I applied for this Fulbright to Bosnia for the Research Award. And initially, what attracted me was like I had this like research project since like undergrad that I wanted to do, and it had these big question ideas and stuff like that. And I brought it to like a lot of different local organizations back home. There were Bosnian diasporic organizations. I also myself am Bosnian, and they just felt like the scope was too big, or there was limited resources. And then I came here for my master's to kind of explore what this is further. Maybe I could have different access to different archives. And I'm currently a graduate student in history. So it is a historical based project that also looks at gender policy in Bosnia. And I still couldn't have access to the Bosnian side of things, even though we did have more access to like, more diplomatic archives on the Rutgers campus. So I said, okay, let me see what's out there. And that's how I met Laura, and I went to the OSDFA office and kind of just talked about generally what my interests were. And then she says, oh, have you ever thought about the Fulbright? And to my surprise, I didn't know they had research awards. I thought, I was like, oh, why would I go teach English in Bosnia? Like, I was like kind of confused. So then I eventually looked at the research part and I saw this is perfect. And I was like, all right, let me pitch this to the Fulbright committee. And then as I'm writing the application, I realized, the second part of Fulbright is really like how are we going to have the intercultural collaboration. And that made me think about my research in a different way. In the sense I was like, oh, like I could just kind of apply this to the field of history. It's going to add to like kind of historical dialogue, but I didn't realize how it could have real world impact. So it made me think more strategically about like, what is this going to do for Bosnia? How can I make partnerships in Bosnia that last beyond the classroom, or that last beyond just like my own self-interest, which is the research part. And that made me look into like the different agencies, different activist organizations that already exist, and different NGOs that exist in Bosnia. That would not just be helpful for me, but it would also be helpful for Bosnia, but also even the US diplomacy spheres. So it's kind of like evolves as you kind of do it yourself, and let it flow, I would say.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Mina. I do want to be mindful of time. We have just over 10 minutes left in our scheduled allotted time, and we have a few folks on the call with us, some of whom I know are very early in their undergraduate years and are probably very in the exploratory and like future consideration stages. And then I know we have others on the call that are perhaps at the point where they might be thinking about this. And so I want to open this space up and allow anyone who has a question to please feel free to unmute yourself and ask that question. Or if you want to introduce yourself and tell folks kind of where you are and maybe see if there's any advice they'd like to give you.
Hello, my name is Priscilla,
Hi,
and I am actually, hi, in the graduate school at Rutgers Camden, and I am actually presenting my capstone tomorrow. And I have always wanted to study abroad or teach abroad. I'm listening in. And one of the places that I've gone that I wanted to do more research as it relates to my capstone, which is homelessness. And I zeroed in on higher education just to pick a smaller group. But I would love to study other countries to see, because when I was in Dubai a couple of years ago, right before I started grad school, their homelessness and their unemployment and things like that were zero. Like there was none of that. And I just, I like to learn from other countries. I've been to Israel, I've been to Rome, and I always pull aside the tour guide and ask them, what are we doing in America that is not, that we could be doing better? And I feel like if I could get some research in and maybe go for a while, I don't know. So that's why I'm listening in at this Fulbright to see if this could be something that fits with my studies, so that maybe I can come back and do a doctorate. And I don't know what that would be in, so I don't know where to go with this. But I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about homelessness and really starting to attack it. Because it is a big area, and it's often coupled with, I found out, with food insecurity. So housing and food insecurity. What do I do with this? And so my degree is MPA, Master of Public Administration. So that's my program that I'm in. So, and I'll be a May 2025 graduate. Once I present tomorrow, I'll be on track. But yes, so anything anyone can, any advice you could kind of throw out there. I do already have a contact in Dubai who works for the, I guess you would consider it the king of Dubai, but for the government of Dubai. And we are fellow life coaches through the John Maxwell. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Um, Life Coach Network, and we met at our certification training in Florida. So I do have a contact there, and she says, "Come over, and you can do whatever. Just call me when before you come." So, what do you think I could do or should do with that, if anything?
I'll just chime in very briefly. I'm going to kick this back to both of our folks that have actually hit submit on the Fulbright, which I've never done. But Priscilla, your work is important. Congratulations on your upcoming graduation. And the nice thing about your degree and the things that interest you, they're versatile, they are important, they are necessary in so many different spaces. And so I think that there's definitely an opportunity that we can find for you in this world. So I'm gonna leave it to Mina maybe to kick us off since you've applied for a research award, but I think that both of your experiences as Fulbright folks are valuable. So go ahead.
First, I want to say that's amazing. I love your research. I definitely think that it fits 100% in line with like what Fulbright would be looking for in terms of like what kind of research it wants to kind of support. And what I really like about yours is that it has real world impact, and it also is talking about diplomacy across both spaces. Now, for the contact piece, that's going to be amazing for you for the letter of affiliation, which oof, like when you're doing a research award, that is the most exhausting thing. And what that is basically getting a letter from an organization or an institution, whether it's academic or government institution. You would basically be looking to them, being like, hey, will you sponsor this research? Now, sponsorship doesn't mean that they would have to provide monetary gain, but sometimes they do. Sometimes we're like, oh, I really like this research. We'll support it as well on our side. But what it really is just saying like, hey, we've met with Priscilla. We're going to talk about this research and we're going to move forward with it because I think it has real world value for both of our spaces. So I would say with your contact, be like, hey, just kind of put feelers out. I'm applying for this award. Would you want to support this research in this space? And can you, maybe provide an organization or you yourself give us that letter of affiliation? And then the second piece too is the language component. So some spaces, I'm not sure about like Dubai in terms of like what their recommendations are for language. You may need to know the language of the space, and that's the only thing I would add, really, because I feel like you have a really good like you would have a strong personal statement. You would have a really great, like, oh, what is my research trying to do section? And the other two pieces I would say is like maybe just think about the language component and like what are they looking for language requirements? And I would say just show that you did some sort of language there. You were working to learn. I'm assuming it's Arabic in Dubai, but like learning Arabic and what that is. Even if it's recommended, even if it's a novice, like I speak like native Bosnian, but like I said, well, I'm gonna go the extra mile and be like, okay, well, I'm very invested in this project and in this community. So that is the only thing that I would add, but thank you for doing that research because I feel like it would have 100% impact across both spaces.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I guess just to add on a little bit, Mina covered a lot of great things because she was a research applicant, so she knows a bit more about that than I do. But I think you would have a very strong application. It sounds like your application would be very specific. It's very focused on a particular thing. You have that background that would support you being able to do that research. I would
Mhm.
probably say if you want to focus on that topic, I would recommend the research grant over an ETA. ETAs do have the option sometimes to do a supplemental project, but I think that might take away from your application. If you try to argue that you should teach on top of doing research, I think it would be better just to focus on the research, at least for what I'm hearing from your interests right now. But it is great that you have that connection there. You have that connection to the country. You can show that you are very culturally competent, which is something they care about. So, yeah, I think you absolutely should go for it if you have the opportunity to.
Now, how does that work if you're, for me? So, as far as, okay, so I also work for workers. How would that work? Am I taking am I taking time off from work? Is that my own personal time? Does it have to be a year,
Yeah, I think I'll chime in here, Priscilla. So I will say that for the U.S. student program, the timelines and kind of the confines of the award are pretty much set for the most part. As an administrator at this campus, you may potentially be eligible for applying for what's called a Fulbright Administrators Award. That is another path that does not take you away for the same duration of time. I know you're also talking about someday pursuing a PhD. The Scholar program also allows for a little bit more flexibility, knowing that those are working professionals. So the student program is really for folks who maybe are in a sometimes a stage of transition, right? You're graduating with this master's degree. Is this the time of your life where you want to say, I can devote, 6, 8, 10 months to myself to go and do this project and have this experience? And do I have the support of my employer to return, to my position? Those are questions that I haven't encountered. A lot of times it's people who are sort of at marking a moment of transition. It's a great gap year program for the students that are just finishing, undergrad or maybe finishing a master's and want to do something before they apply to that PhD or that next, stage, coming back for a new career. As you heard from Caitlin, she finished her master's in library science and then was going to come back and, pursue her profession, but wanted more experience to do her job better. Mina is finishing a graduate degree and is using this as a launch pad for continued education and training. So those are some of the things that, you will encounter and maybe have to navigate a little.
Okay.
I wanted to share the application, or I'm sorry, an example. And so this is obviously pointed at the example that you just shared with us, Priscilla. I know you're driving. Please don't strain your eyes. This is something we can talk about.
I'm not deaf.
No worries. But
I'll go back and watch. I'll go
that's
back
right.
and watch the recording. Yeah.
And for everyone else, while you may not be considering the UAE specifically, I thought this was a good opportunity to kind of look at a page. And I mentioned so many of those things, right? So they give a little overview of what the award is. In this case, we're talking about a research award. They tell you right up front, we have 2 open spaces for someone to propose a research project. The grant is from 4 months to 10 months. So maybe you can propose something that's only 4 months. And is it reasonable and feasible that you can get your project done in that amount of time, get on the ground? You already have connections, right? So maybe that's a possibility. Typically they want you to come at the start of the academic year and you can stay as long as that full duration. They tell you a little about orientation. They tell you who they're looking for, right? Master's degree candidates and graduates are eligible, will be considered, it says. Ideal, things that they're looking for. So you can read that profile a little bit and make sure you're a good fit. Sometimes we'll see in one of these profiles that, they don't want any undergrads, right? They want you to be at least in graduate school. Okay, great. Moving on to the next country if that's not you, right? So you can read that. They give you a little description of like what it's like to live in the UAE. They will give you, some other eligibility criteria, mostly that you're not a dual resident is what is often the case. Here you can be a bachelor's or master's degree. You do not have to have a foreign language evaluation completed. You cannot enroll in graduate school, but you can do an independent project. Here are some of the suggestions for places you might find affiliation. And so hopefully, the government is on there. And if not, that's okay. It says here, that you can usually find others and you need to include that with your application. Here are some details about what they will give you for your monthly stipend, right? And then here you get this upfront one-time allowance to help you get ready and settled in while you're there. You can see here that on average, it costs, as much as $4,000 a month, and they are allocating more than that. So you're not only, covered for your cost of living, but you're making a little bit, not a lot, but a little. It details housing. I know this is something Caitlin went through and she could talk a little bit about that, but basically I believe, Caitlin, you did a homestay, right? Is that true?
Homestay was one of the options. I ended up in a 1-bedroom apartment, but some of my friends did end up in homestays.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, commonly if you're an ETA, they are providing some sort of housing or guidance towards housing. Or in grad school would be true too. Other places they might say like, no, but there's a vast alumni network who they can point you in the right direction. And obviously they're paying for the cost of your housing. Here, this is also something else. They will provide financial support if you have a dependent. So if you're bringing a spouse or a child with you, this country will allow for that. And as long as they spend at least 80% of the time abroad with you, they can actually qualify for additional benefits. That's not true in every country's case, but it's great to see that this might be something that if that is pertinent to you, that would be an option. So I wanted to use this page as an example of how you sort of navigate the website and kind of reading the host country details. And you can find these all listed under countries. You kind of click your region and then drill down from there. You'll also find on the website, since I'm here, just application components is a really great spot to check things out. If you click on either of the awards that you're thinking about, so typically ETA or study research, you will find a detailed list of all these things, including all the short answer prompts, right? Without ever having to go into the back end of the portal. All this is here for you. The award search is another really nice feature where you can kind of narrow things down. I know I'm applying to an ETA only. I know I want to be in Asia only. I know, etc. Right? And then it'll start to provide you with countries that fit the criteria that you have established. Up in the corner, it tells you how many awards are available for that country, etc. So I digress a little, but I wanted to share that with everyone. So we are at 5 o'clock, but I want to ask if there are any other questions from anyone on the call. And if there are not, I wanted to just ask for some parting words from Caitlin or Mina as our Fulbright experts, really.
I think this is something that I was thinking about that I didn't get to say at the last session because I had to run out a little bit early. But I want to say that any idea that you have, it deserves to be recognized. And any research that you really want to present or whatever your interests, like invest in yourself and believe in yourself. And then my second piece of advice would be like, don't feel like you're alone. Like you're not alone in the process, not at Rutgers Camden, but you're also not alone in the process. If you think that like maybe this is a shot in the dark, other people are not going to see it, throw it out there and you'll be surprised at how many people actually come to support you. So believe that you have community and also believe in yourself.
Yeah, I guess just to add on top of that, I think if you have some sort of inkling that you want to do this, you don't know exactly what you want. It's okay to not know what you want. Laura and everyone else at the office, they can help guide you along the process. They can help you figure out exactly what you're looking for. Maybe you think I'm not the kind of person that can handle this. Maybe this is a little bit too much for me to move away, to live away from home, not be able to see my family. But it's a lot better than you think. Not having expectations when you go into your country, that will help you a lot if you end up going, because it really never ends up the way that you expect. And once you're there, you will have support from your commission. There are other grantees that you can talk to, even just other foreigners inside of the country. There are a lot of networks that you can connect with, and it's a great experience just to try. It might not be your cup of tea. You never have to do something like this again if you don't want to. But I think it's better to try because you never know what will happen.
I love that. I love both of your pieces of advice. All right, so we'll officially wrap things up for today's introductory info session. I know we threw a lot at you.